I should record. Yes, thanks. Thanks,
Anyways.
Karina. We are recording this, everybody. Just a quick acknowledgement of country. I'm down in Melbourne, in Naarm. So I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and the Bunurong peoples as the traditional owners of the land that I work on, play on, and live on. Really happy for you to acknowledge and do the same in the chat if you would like to. And yeah, next page, please. Today's agenda is that oh,
Is
uh,
everyone else able to see the presentation?
I can see it.
it might be because you're, did you add your AI thing? Because it might be, sometimes there are privacy rules that Teams has where, I don't know why, but if you add an AI thing on, it won't let you record or see the presentation. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. Sorry. I'm not
Yeah, I did
technical
see
enough.
the AI transcript was activated. I think from when, yeah, maybe you might have to try turning that off. It might help.
Yeah. So anyway, our quick agenda. Let us know if you've turned it off and then you still get the issues. But anyway, so we're going to go through membership types and benefits, our eligibility criteria. Then we'll get on to the really serious part is how to do a code self-assessment. We'll definitely cover governance and finance related requirements. And then we'll talk through a bit more about our timelines, what you can expect, what the process is, what the approval process is like, and then dates and timeframes. And then, of course, there are some time for you to ask your own questions. But of course, feel free to ask us questions or leave a question in the chat box if a question comes to you while we're presenting. And I guess otherwise, hopefully this is really informative for you. And I am going to throw over. Oh, just before I throw over to Karina, next slide, Marvin, please. Just letting you know, there will be lots of acronyms. So if there is something that you don't know, please just pop your mic on and ask us, or just type it in the chat box. Thanks a lot. I will now hand over to Karina. Thanks, Karina.
Thanks, Whitney. Next slide, please, Marvin. Oh, actually, so this one is just a general kind of overview of the current ACFID structure. So this just helps, I guess, build a bit of a picture for everyone here of what the ACFID team looks like. You can see there's kind of fairly small number, and basically Marvin, Whitney and I sit within the effectiveness and engagement team. So as Whitney mentioned, I'm the effective membership and engagement advisor at ACFID, and Marvin and Whitney are part of the code standards and code team. And that slide actually might be useful later on to just briefly refer to when we talk a little bit more about other things that ACFID offers. But for the moment, I'll just move on to the next one. Thanks, Marvin. So yes, just briefly introducing membership. ACFID membership is obviously the reason why you're all here, because you're either thinking about applying or you might already be kind of quite knee-deep into the application process. And yeah, it's basically, as ACFID is the peak body for Australian organisations working in international development. Membership is in many ways our kind of raison d'etre, and we have at present 157 members in total. 137 of those are full members and 20 of those are affiliate members. This little chart is, I think, pretty up to date. The membership is pretty dynamic, and we're really excited that we're getting so much interest this year from a lot of really dynamic and vibrant smaller organisations in particular that are doing some great work. So as the membership advisor, I am kind of the first point of contact. I will have already spoken to a number of you about the process. And I helped the code team just kind of throughout the cycle of the applications and helping to make sure things go as smoothly as possible and engaging with existing members as well on sorts of benefits and opportunities that we offer. Next slide, please, Marvin. So as I kind of just touched on, there are two membership types. We have full membership, which is, I think, what everyone on this call will be interested in. So that is open to Australian nonprofit organisations that are doing overseas program work in international development or humanitarian action, or there's a small subset of organisations that might be doing some program work with Indigenous communities in Australia. That's one area that we also allow full members to be in. Organisations that are full members become, by necessity, signatories to the ACFID Code of Conduct. So as many of you are also aware, this is the process which really underpins the application process and is the definition of ACFID membership in a way, being a signatory to that code. And full members pay annual fees in line with their size, which is determined by the amount of disbursements that they have in their program work overseas. Affiliate membership is quite different, and there won't be kind of much of this sort of webinar focusing on that because it is a different type of membership and this is really about that signatory to the code process. But affiliate membership is open to organisations, institutions that are closely aligned with ACFID's work and the work of its members, but they're not actually eligible for full membership. So that's usually because they're not doing direct program work. They're often research institutions and other organisations that might be, or doing advocacy, for example. So that is open, as I say, to organisations sharing our vision and who would like to work closely with our members, and they pay a different kind of flat annual fee. Next slide. Thanks, Marvin. So I'm just going to give a really kind of quick snapshot of membership benefits. And so this is something that naturally becoming a member, many people already sort of have a clear idea in mind of what they'd like to get out of it, but sometimes new members or prospective members don't sort of know the full range of benefits that we can offer. So there's quite a few things. I would say that one of the sort of things that we really try to give our members value with is through providing ongoing events and focus training and development opportunities that help to develop skills in the organisation across all kinds of areas of development and humanitarian action, which we try to sometimes have kind of more general opportunities, like, for example, our introduction to the sector workshops, and then sometimes very focused training and development that might be aligned with a particular community of practice. And that participation in working groups, communities of practice and committees is also something that a lot of members find really valuable because it allows them to form those deeper, really kind of working relationships with other members that might be working in very close alignment with their organisation. It allows them to share all kinds of resources and also further develop, again, their own kind of skills and capabilities within the organisation. Something some members are quite interested in is participating in ACFID's policy and advocacy initiatives. So we have a full policy and advocacy team here at head office at ACFID, and they are always very busy working on all kinds of things. We have some ongoing campaigns. For example, the Safer World for All campaign is something that they've been working on throughout this year. We did, for example, a budget analysis on Australia's aid expenditure. And they're regularly speaking to MPs and other key decision makers about priorities for the development and humanitarian sector and non-profit organisations in Australia. So there's a range of things that they do that they're always very happy if there's members who are interested in being involved with that, in looking at ways that we can help members to do that. Other membership benefits, and as I don't know if I mentioned, these are the full member benefits, is in attending the ACFID AGM every year, and they have the right to vote as long as membership fees are up to date. And they can also nominate a member from their organisation for election to the ACFID board. And The big one, in a way, I feel like this, I would have mentioned this at the top, is of course potentially applying. Well, if you become a full member, you then are on the pathway to be eligible to apply for the ANCP program with DFAT. So that's the Australian NGO Corporation program. Again, many of you on the call, I'm sure, are quite familiar with it. It's the main funding program offered by DFAT for development NGOs in Australia that helps to provide funding for their programs. So
it's like very
oops,
like similar kind
somebody
of
might
vibes
need
to
to
Bali.
mute. Thank you. So yes, having AFID membership is a prerequisite to applying for DFAT's ANCP funding program. A recent rule that's come into place is that you must be a member of ACFID for at least 2 years before your organisation is eligible to apply for ANCP. So that's a rule that's coming into effect this year. That's introduced by DFAT. But yes, it's still one of the main membership benefits that obviously ACFID can help with in terms of helping your organisation get on the path to applying for that funding. And in that area, another really key benefit is being a signatory to the code, because it is like a really big undertaking for the organisation, and it does, as many people are aware, it requires a lot of work in terms of demonstrating compliance. The benefit of that is that it does enhance credibility of the organisation as being practicing development in terms of what's considered a very high standard. So that offers a certain degree of legitimacy that's useful for a range of things, whether it's seeking other funding outside of DFAT, through donors, through grant applications, potentially useful for engaging with policymakers, that sort of thing. So and overall, that compliance with the code and being a signatory to the code of conduct helps to enhance the organisation. Many members report that undergoing that initial CSA process and then upholding the reporting every year is a way of just ensuring that organisational systems, governance is really in check with what's kind of considered really good practice. And that just helps overall with organisational performance. Next slide. Thank you, Marvin. So
just before you go on, Karina, sorry, just to mention that you don't have to want to be a part of the ANC program to be a part of ACFID. I think about maybe 30-40% of our members are not
true.
ANCP members and are not interested in applying. So, but if you do want to apply, you do need to be a member.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Whitney. Yeah, I mean, we do definitely kind of speak to ANCP a lot because many people are interested in applying for that, but it's definitely not the only reason. As Whitney mentioned, there's plenty of members who find a lot of those other benefits really useful and maintain their membership long term despite not being in ANCP or seeking that. So sorry, next, thanks, Marvin. Very briefly, affiliate membership benefits, in case you know of any other organisations that might be interested in this as well, is that they do receive some of the same rights as full members in terms of being entitled to attend the AGM, though they don't have voting rights. And they can participate in, for example, communities of practice and ACFID committees, policy advocacy initiatives. And they're often a really strong presence at lots of our networking events, conference, and they receive some of those same membership discounts on things like that, as well as being linked into our member communications. Next, thank you. So on to eligibility, and apologies, some people on the call will be quite familiar with this. I might have even been speaking with some of you about it very recently, but just quite quickly, to be a full member of ACFID, one of the very first things we will do once we've kind of had that first point of contact and reaching out to you about becoming a member is that we will do an eligibility check. And so this is where we just look at some pretty basic criteria that helps us to assess whether an organisation is suitable for applying for membership. And that entails checking things like it's registered as an Australian entity, has an ABN, is actively working in the international aid and development sector. And that's demonstrated through a 2-year financial track record of doing that kind of program work. An organisation must be voluntary non-profit. Members must be mostly non-executive of the board. The organisation must be registered with the Australian Charities and Non-Profits Commission for at least 2 years before they're eligible for ACFID membership. And yes, as I mentioned, that 2-year track record, which sort of ties into the ACNC, because as many of you are aware, you do have to produce those financial reports for ACNC. Next, thanks, Marvin. Okay, so on to some of the kind of key steps of making a membership application. So when you go to the main public ACFID website, there is a section where you can create a My ACFID account, and that will take you through to our portal, which many of you will be familiar with by now. Where you can create an account, and then that will allow you to start taking the first steps for making, for example, that eligibility form submission, and then moving on a bit further down the application process. So my ACFID portal is pretty straightforward to use, and if there's any kind of problems with that technical side of things, our team's always really happy to help out. Thanks, Marvin. So I'll just mention a bit more about the eligibility check. So as I said, that's the very first step in the process, and those eligibility checks can be submitted at any time of year. So you do just need to sign up for a My ACFID account, and then you'll kind of be able to see how to submit that eligibility. It just requires filling out just some kind of pretty basic organisational details, like the key board members, supplying some key organisational documents like annual reports, AGM minutes, ACNC registration, and that can be submitted, as I say, at any time. It will be reviewed by us. We aim to approve those eligibilities if they are, if we're able to approve them, we'll do that within a week or two. And then you're just required to pay a one-off application fee. And this is just to cover kind of the side of our work involved with applications, because it is full-time work for several people within the organisation. So that fee just helps just kickstart that process. And once the application's finished and completed, if you're successful with memberships, that fee's deducted from the first year of membership fees. So once those steps have been completed, you kind of enter the really deeper part of the application stage, which is where you complete a full application with a bit more information and a code self-assessment. So this is where the deadlines come into play, in that we have 2 application rounds per year. So typically these are at the end of January and July every year, and this allows us to just space out and manage the cycle of applications, because they're a big piece of work for us to review and put through our kind of processes. So we do accept, as I say, an application at one of those 2 times of the year, and then that starts off that full process for you of starting that and then entering review. Next slide, please, Marvin. So that application form, it's got a bit more information. This is what we call the full application form, a bit more information than the initial eligibility check, in that it will ask for some information like the aim and purpose of the organisation, history, regional focus, the nature of development aid activities, where your funding comes from, primarily whether it's donations or other program funding that you receive. There's a question about what you hope to gain by becoming a member. We require a statement of risk, just as to whether you identify any potential risks of your organisation obtaining ACFID membership. And also we require that at least the CEO and board chair of the organisation, but ideally even more staff within the organisation, complete an online course, which is an introduction to the code of conduct. So that's just kind of a very foundational thing that we need organisations to undertake, so they're aware of what the code of conduct is and its purpose and that sort of thing. Next slide, Marvin. So that's done through our Learn with ACFID e-module learning. So many of you will have already have done that course, and there's also a range of other really useful courses in that e-module, which is open to anyone within your organisation. And we highly encourage you to check back in with that now and then to see if there might be something else that's useful. And yeah, good point, Whitney. Those are separate from My ACFID. The Learn with ACFID portal is a separate. The URLs down the bottom there. Sorry, next one. Thank you. So thank you. I hope that was kind of a useful general introduction. I'll be happy to answer any questions later on about those initial membership processes, but for now, I'll hand over to the code and standards team.
Thanks, Karina. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Yes, so like Karina mentioned, once you've done that initial application and have started getting your got your login to My ACFID, you start the more substantial part of the assessment. And now we call it a code self-assessment, otherwise known as a CSA. And that means that you are proving yourself as an organization that you meet all of the standards that we describe in the ACFID Code of Conduct. So let's talk a little bit about the Code of Conduct. Next slide, please, Marvin. Thank you. So what's the point of the code? The code is to improve international development and humanitarian action outcomes and increase stakeholder trust by enhancing transparency, accountability, and effectiveness. So basically we're sharing, the code is voluntary. It is a way of, I guess, providing a set of language and a set of regulations or guidelines for all of our members to agree on and say, yes, this is good practice. This is how we all want to operate when we are working with our local communities or with governments or, just when we're fundraising with the Australian public. Next slide, please. Oh, can you press enter, enter, enter? Thank you. So yes, the features of the code is that it is voluntary. It is owned by the members, as in the code team and the ACFID board or the ACFID staff can't just go around changing the code willy-nilly. If we do change the code, which happens every 5 years, or at least a review happens every 5 years, I shouldn't say a change happens every 5 years, a review happens every 5 years, and we do a lot of interviews and focus groups and all those things. And if our members want to have things changed in the code, that's when that happens. So it's owned by ACFID members. So if you become an ACFID member, you also get a say on what the code will look like at every review. It's self-regulatory in that you report to us every year about how you are meeting the code and what you're doing to do so. And if you don't meet the code, what you're doing to meet that in the future. There is an independent complaints handling mechanism. So the code is looked after, I guess, looked after by the Code of Conduct Committee, also known as the CCC. And if a complaint comes through to us about any particular member, the Code of Conduct Committee, the CCC, will deal with that independently, and they sit outside of the board and outside of the ACFID staff. And all full members of ACFID must demonstrate compliance with the code. So you can be assured that if someone on their website or any member says that they are a member of ACFID, that all their operations and governance and practices meet the code of conduct. Next slide. Thank you. So like I said, the code of conduct is continually evolving and there is a formal review every 5 years. And you can see, a bit of that timeline. And the last big review we had was in 2003, 2 years ago now. But that was a really big piece of work. So we have now ushered in the revised code of conduct, which includes several new components and commitments, as well as some realignment with ACMCs and ACNCs, as in the Australian Not-for-Profit and Charities Commission, and ANCP as wording and guidelines, so that we understand that, trying to reduce the compliance burden of all our members who, probably have to do multiple reportings throughout their, year. Next slide, please. Oh, can you press the enter button again? Thanks. So just a quick overview on roles and responsibilities. as ACFID members, if you choose to proceed with this process, is your board members are there and they're responsible for ensuring the accuracy and transparency of your organizational reporting. They do have to approve your yearly reporting. They have to also review and approve all your financial statements, and this has to be evidenced in your meeting minutes. They also need to be well across most of your safeguarding policies and procedures, including child protection and prevention of sexual abuse, exploitation, and harassment. PSE, exploitation, A, abuse, H, harassment. And these days, this is a new commitment, but also understanding a whole of organization risk management. And, you know, they're welcome to say that they publicly commit to the code. As staff members, annual reporting, annual financial reporting, you do need to be aware of how the complaints mechanism works and how if one of your primary stakeholders or, you know, general public that you work with want to complain, you need to know how that process works and how they are allowed to complain to ACFID, and you should be able to, you know, be able to channel them over to us at ACFID if they don't feel like their complaints have been resolved adequately. And, you know, you can work with your whole team to talk about sharing best practice. And again, you can show off and say, hey, we are committed to the code. As for us, what we do when you're part of the membership, we assess all the new applicants, we review and give feedback on all the reporting every year from all 150 members, or except for the affiliates, so 130. We also verify your documents and we do something, we check for emergency appeals. So there's a specific code of conduct, or there's specific guidelines that you need to meet if you launch an appeal, an emergency appeal. Like, let's say PNG has another earthquake and you want to raise money. We do spot checks on those. And we provide lots of learning opportunities and networking opportunities. And quickly on the CCC is that they make decisions on any breaches of the code. They handle complaints, and yeah, they, I guess, caretakers of the code. Next slide, please. Well, I've talked a lot about the CCC. So it's just made out of about 12 members. I won't read it all out because, you know, if you want to find out a bit more about the CCC, it is on our website. But if you do become members, the Code of Conduct Committee is somebody or a team of people that you might like to get to know. Next slide, please, Marvin. So, talked a lot about the code in general, but how does it actually work? So, the Code of Conduct describes like high levels of principles of practice that contribute to quality development and humanitarian outcomes. They're organized into 3 clusters on approaches, on processes, and on our systems. They are then further broken down into principles or what we call quality principles, which then take a specific thematic area and describe best practices. So what this looks like in practicality, next slide, please, this is something called, or this is an example of the quality assurance framework, which if you are applying or just about to begin your CSA process, I would definitely highly recommend and highly encourage you to get very, very familiar with the quality assurance framework, or otherwise we call it the QAF. Perhaps Karina or Marvin could link the PDF of the QAF. But this is what it looks like on the PDF, is that it describes the quality principle as the title. Then there's this explanation of the collective values. Then it breaks down even further into smaller sections of commitments. Now, all these commitments are what you and your organization are committing to. The compliance indicators are showing you what it is that we expect from these practices and what the outcome of those practices should be. And last but not least, and the most important thing for your code self-assessment is the verifiers. These are the things that Marvin and I check against your responses and in your CSA as evidence of meeting the code. So you might have a very lovely response that addresses the compliance indicators and tell us how you consider, the root causes of poverty and inequity. But unless you show us that you have a planning framework or some kind of template that does those things, we're going to have to ask you for more questions. So most important thing, if you're starting your CSA, is to address all the verifiers listed in the QOF, or otherwise you can go to online, the Good Practice Toolkit. That also lists all of the verifiers and includes resources and examples from all of our other members. Thank you. So, next slide, please. So if you do become a member, this is your reporting cycle. We do have a 3-yearly cycle. So you have to report every year, but it's on a 3-year cycle. All members will report 5 months after their financial year end. So most organizations have, an ATO financial year. That's, July to June. So that means that if you have that, then usually your reporting date is 30th November of that same year. But some others have different years. Some people have like a calendar year, January to December, which means then you are reporting in May the following year. So every 3 years you report a full CSA. That means that you have to complete a very big application, just the same as if you are starting to apply for a CSA now. You'll see that whole process is that you have to write a narrative response, upload documents, as well as show us things on your website. So that's happens every 3 years. In the intervening years, so you will report something called an exceptions report. So that's a lot less work. That is only, you just need to report if you think that your organization is not meeting the code. So lots of organizations, if they've passed their CSA, don't report any kind of exceptions. And then all you have to do is upload your latest audited financial records. And then your reporting's done for the year. So yeah, there's a cycle, but there are easier years to report on, and some years are a little, take a bit more work. Next slide, please. So let's jump into how do you complete your CSA? Yes, next slide, please. As mentioned, there are 3 key documents for completing a CSA. That is the Quality Assurance Framework, available online in a PDF form, otherwise known as the QOF. We have the Code of Conduct itself, which is, again, online in PDF form, as well as the Good Practice Toolkit, which is online. The Good Practice Toolkit is interactive, and it's a whole section on the website that goes through every single commitment and every single compliance indicator and lists all the different verifiers, has a guide on good practice, so, suggestions on how you could meet those verifiers, and then another section below, which also then gives examples of both what our current members are doing or what other international development organizations in the broader, sector are doing. So there are a lot of resources there to show you how to meet your compliance. So if you're not familiar with those things, save all those links that Marvin is popping on the chat, because you'll need to know them inside out. Next slide, please. We also have quite a number of templates and tools available to support your CSA reporting. This is both for whether you're a new applicant or an existing member. We have a reporting template in Excel where you might want to mark against your responses against all the different commitments. We have a frequently asked questions section. We also have financial reporting templates. These are really important. The financial reporting templates are really important. And if you outsource your finances and your accounting, this template might be something that you want to send to them earlier rather than later. But Marvin will cover that a little bit later, because ACFID does ask for a specific financial reporting format. And if it's not in that format, we're going to have to ask you to do it again. But that will be for later. Next slide, please. So this is, again, a long list, and I won't read through every single one of these. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you the slides. But your CSA submission must include the following documents. These are all these policies that are required to be uploaded or a link to be sent in your responses. You cannot say, oh, we haven't got it yet, we're developing it now, or, we haven't got it yet, but we'll develop it in 6 months. That's not how the compliance works. Compliance means to meet your compliance with the ACFID code, you already need to have these. So if you don't have them, then you might not quite be ready to apply for ACFID membership and need to work with your leadership team to develop all these policies and then have them reviewed by us, and we can work with you on that. But every single policy does have specific things that you have to cover. So again, it is really important that you go through the Good Practice Toolkit online or the QOF to make sure that your policies meet every single dot point that is listed in required by the policies, particularly for things like child safeguarding. For your policy on separation of development and non-development, as well as your governing instrument. There are specific requirements for that. If you don't meet them, we're going to have to return the form back to you and ask you, hey, can you show us how you demonstrate compliance against those specific things? And the last other thing is really important, is that you need to be able to show us audited full financial statements with an independent auditor's opinion. So in Australia, an independent auditor is a specific qualification. So you need to get someone who is an independent auditor and not just a regular accountant. Yes, so you have to have all these prepared. So the biggest tip is you need to have all these prepared before you start your CSA, because we're going to ask you for them. Next question. Next slide. But let me know if you guys have any questions down in the chat. So again, just a really, really quick reminder, jump into the QOF, really dig deep into that and spend some time reviewing the QOF, because again, what we check, me and Marvin, we check against the verifiers. And if you're not meeting those, we can't qualify you as complying. So, next slide, please. Our biggest tips and takeaway is definitely utilize the QOF and utilize the Good Practice Toolkit online. There's heaps of resources there, including examples and templates. Be really detail-orientated and descriptive in your responses. Imagine that you are onboarding a new staff member. Tell us how your organization operates. How does your new person, or if you were onboarding us, know that you're working ethically? How do we know? How do we get your public materials and photographs approved? How do you make sure that the people that you're photographing are consenting to doing that? Or, all those little things. It's like we want to know things step by step. And it'd be great if you use examples as well on how you operationalize all of your policies. Next slide, please. So I'm going to jump into some more practical examples of what is an acceptable and what isn't an acceptable narrative response in the CSA. So one of the commitments, 6.1, is we are truthful in our communications. This first example is a non-compliant answer. You can see that it's quite short. I'm not going to read it out loud, but you can read it yourself. But, it's quite short. It's not very descriptive. It's quite general in its response. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a compliant response. It talks about what they have as their policy for approving public materials. It talks about their standardized processes, and it talks about who in the chain, in the leadership chain or in the staff organization, needs to approve their communications. It also talks about consent forms. It talks about their IT and social media policies. And, again, it just gives a lot more detail about what is happening in the organization and how they're operationalizing their work. And then I've got another example of a compliant response, and this one is an excellent response. And this is, again, talks about having an approval matrix. It talks about who is collecting, your information. Talks about what is consent or how they consider informed consent, not just we're going to, give out papers in English and get people to sign them. It acknowledges that there are power imbalances and how that affects consent. So it shows us that they're really deeply thinking about some of the issues that do come up in humanitarian and development organizations and in the sector. Talks about attending training and how staff, are trained on ethical collection processes. There's templates. Images have a policy of being updated, every 2 or 3 years, and that there is a cycle of out-of-date, photos or information is taken out of circulation. That's important because sometimes we do reuse, photos, but if it was 10 years ago, is that still current? So this is an excellent example of a compliant response. You don't have to meet this particular example. Number 3 is like top-notch, excellent response, but example 2 is a perfectly fine response as well. So having given some examples and given some tips around your CSA, the next section, we are going to talk about governance and financial requirements. So I'm going to hand over to Marvin. And just before I hand over, are there any questions? Doesn't seem like it, or you can pop them down in the chat and we can come back to it. Otherwise, take it away, Marvin.
All right, thanks, Whitney. So, hello. My name is Marvin, shared by Whitney and Karina. I am one of the code assessors, and that my role is to review members' compliance of the acted code, specifically to the portions that's related to finance and governance. So the focus of my presentation will be to highlight and emphasize the usual verifiers under each of the commitment and compliance indicators that we usually require resubmission from new members applying. So this does not completely show all verifiers. So what I'm going to show is the usual for improvement of new applicants. So let's discuss first those that are related to governance, which is under Quality Principle 7 of the Code. The first item here is a straightforward requirement that your constitution or governing instrument should be in your website, and that when we click it, the link should be working, right? So please ensure that all documents the code require that should be on your website has the links working. We suggest also in your response that you provide the direct link where we can verify it. Sometimes we have a hard time looking for where you have placed it in your website. The second requirement here that's related to compliance indicator 7.2.1 is to have a privacy policy that complies both with the Australian privacy policy principles and the payment card industry data security standards, or that's PCI DSS. Your privacy policy should also be published on your website. I'm emphasizing this because most of the new applicants we've reviewed did not include PCI DSS in their privacy policies, and that they only reference Australian privacy principles. So this PCI DSS applies to any organization, regardless of size and industry, that stores, processes, or transmits payment card data. And you are actually typically contractually bound by your partner banks or payment processors to comply with this standard anyway. So more of these details of this requirement is in our good practice toolkit. For the third item, Whitney, would you like to further expound?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks,
Sure.
Marvin. So again, the complaints policy that is required by ACFID that we check is quite specific. There's quite a lot of different things that your policy does need to cover, including the types of processes and ways in which you support people who complain or give feedback. And particularly because we are in the international development and humanitarian space, there is a lot that is around how do you make these complaint processes accessible and understandable to your local primary stakeholders and different types of points of contact. So please go back through the code and go back through the QOF and make sure that your complaints policies are actually meeting all of those required dot points. It's also to make sure that there is a whole section on what kind of policies and procedures need to be available online on your website. And if they're not online, we've got to come back to you and be like, you're not meeting the code. So again, some of those things are pretty easy quick fixes. Just make sure that you know what is available and what needs to be on the website and how to find it. Especially with some policies, sometimes we've had organizations who kind of bury all of their policies like in this giant maze of click here about us and then click down into something else and then click down into another thing before we even get to the policies. That's kind of annoying. But it's just, if you can make it really easy for us to find it, that would be great. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Whitney. Yeah, so hopefully we can help each other out in terms of efficiently reviewing your code self-assessment. So moving to the fourth item, these are all related to specific statements to your governance-related documents. I broke them down into two parts. As the first requirement here, as highlighted in green, are statements that we need to see in your governing instrument or constitution, or in a charter, or in a separate policy, meaning it doesn't need to be in your constitution. It can be in your other documented policies. So Most of our existing members have a separate governance policy that includes all of these required statements. In the second requirement, as highlighted in blue, this statement should be in your constitution, explicitly stated, which the code requires that, for example, frequency of your members meeting should be at least annually, which is your AGM, and the frequency of your board of directors meeting should be at least twice a year. We had instances where the constitution of a member states that their directors may decide how often, where, and when they meet, which actually may appear to comply with the code, but it doesn't explicitly state that meetings must occur at least twice annually. So as required by the code, we requested them to amend their constitution. So going back to the first item here as highlighted in green, first, sorry, I think I haven't moved my slide. Oh, sorry, there you go. So first one is having process for induction of new responsible people or your board of directors. So we do not need to see actual copy of this process of yours as long as we see in your governance related policy a statement that you have a process for this, that would be acceptable, especially that this process might be too detailed to be included in your governance policy. For the clear term limits, for example, there should be a statement in your governance policy or constitution that states that, for example, a maximum term limits for your directors that should be documented there. For the clear number of executive terms a responsible person may serve, there should also be a statement that clearly shows this. For example, a director can serve for up to 3 terms, but can still serve further if approved by a special resolution. For the requirement for the majority of the responsible people to be non-executive, we should also see this statement in your governance policy or constitution when we say when we say a non-executive, this is a director who does not have a day-to-day role in the management of the company, and they do not hold an executive position such as CEO, CFO, and other management roles. I have provided a sample from an ACFID member where you can see how it demonstrated some of the requirements I mentioned. The complete details of the requirement for each commitment and CIs is in our QIF and ACFID good practice toolkit as mentioned by Whitney. So those are just helpful links when we share to you the slide. All right, moving now to the next slide, which is those related to Quality Principle 8 that covers finance and annual report. First one is you are required to send us copy of your financial risk management policy. Organizational-wide policy is fine as long as financial related risks are considered. The second one is that the second requirement here is that you are required to send us copies of your financial wrongdoing policy that includes your policy against fraud, corruption, bribery, terrorism financing, and money laundering in violation of sanction imposed by the Australian government. One of the most common resubmission comment we provide is new applicants providing us incomplete policy that for example, an applying member has no policies against corruption and bribery, but they do have for fraud. So we need to see a complete financial wrongdoing policy as required by the code. Or we were not able to see the vital features we expect from a financial wrongdoing policy. So I will just move to the next slide quickly and come back here just to show to you some guidance on the vital features of a financial wrongdoing policy. There you go. So I documented this in detail and I provided also some more notes for you here for your guidance. For letter A here, please make sure you have all of these types of financial wrongdoing covered in your policy and that you have definitions documented. This is important as not all readers understand the different types of financial wrongdoing. For letter B, make sure all individuals and organizations who you work with internal or external to your organizations, are covered by the scope of your policy. I also have provided an example from an ACFED member for your further guidance. Now, I'm going to go back to my previous slide. So, where are we? I think we're already on the second. Oh, sorry. We're still on the first. And now, all eyes on the third item here. So that requires you to have a policy that addresses checking of individuals and organizations receiving funds against the Australian National Security Listed Terrorist Organization and the DFAT ASO Consolidated List of all persons and entities listed under Australian sanctions laws. This means that we should see in your policy that you do have this process of checking all individuals and organizations you fund or you pay be checked with these listings. All individuals and organizations not just covers your partners, but all you fund or pay, such as your contractors, staff, and etc. I have provided an example from an ACFID member here how they demonstrated their compliance to this by having that policy. So moving now to the next requirement, so that you should have full audited financial statements or report that comply with accounting standards. And you should have an independent auditor's report that complies with the Australian auditing standards. So I understand that some organizations are exempted to provide audited financial statements with the auditor's report with the ACNC, but there are code requirements that are more prescriptive. So we have experiences that new applicants provide compilation report. Sorry, just changing to my accountant hat. So what the auditor provided is a compilation report instead of an independent auditor's report, right? So please make sure that your auditor is aware of the ACFID requirement of having an independent auditor's report, right? Last item here is about new members, lack of confirmation that you have due diligence process to the prospective partners you will fund, and that these three items indicated here are completely included in your process. We have members sharing that this does not apply to them as they do not fund partners, but we still do encourage them to develop one in case their plans change in the future. So at least you have a ready process for implementation. You can also provide us details of an equivalent due diligence process you conduct when you select new partners, even though you do not plan to fund them. Okay. All right. Just highlighting here the specific compliance indicators and verifiers that does not apply to you as member applicants, but will be when you become a member. So first one is applicants are required to provide their latest annual report as part of your application. However, due to its historical nature, the annual report is not expected to meet all the requirements outlined in Compliance Indicator 8.3.1. At the minimum, you must provide the activities that your organization has undertaken, such as your accomplishments. And that annual report should be in your website. For the second item, as you are not yet a member, you are not yet required to provide ACFID code compliant financial statements. Please don't be confused with the another requirement of having a full audited financial statements. So the ACFID code compliant financial statements is like there's a specific format to that. So don't be pressured to actually already provide us with this format. But of course, if you're happy to already follow the ACFID format, why not? But for now, as you are not yet a member, you are not yet required to comply with this format, but just the full audited financial statements with the auditor's independent opinion. All right. Yeah. So I guess before I move now to the time frame tips and FAQs, Any of you have questions for QP 7 and 8? Yeah, I understand this is detailed. So if you thought of like any other questions, of course, you can always send us an email to help you out on that. Okay. Guess no questions for now. Okay. So moving now, first off is the time frame. So in general, applications take up to 18 months from eligibility application and CSA submission until your application is approved. This means that we have 18 months in total from the time you have submitted your CSA until your applications are approved by the ACFID board. The code team have up to an estimate of 6 months to return our initial CSA feedback to new applicants. Delays will be communicated to you if there will be. We are a small and lean team, so this would give us enough time to complete our initial CSA feedback to you. And it's on a first come, first serve basis. Sorry if that sounds like ordering food. What's a better term for that? So anyway, if the CSA does not have sufficient information or missing policies that we did not see as required by the code, then the code team will ask for resubmission as our initial CSA feedback. This is where new applicants have a chance to add more information to their responses. Resubmissions may delay and or prolong your application timeline as we need more time to have this resolved and cleared. And we usually provide 3 more months for you to clear your resubmission. Then after another few weeks, for us to review your resubmission. So the key to success is doing your CSA really good at first instance. And so you will be. So if we will have a resubmission, it will just be minor. So let's help each other's out. So the goal is like really be good on your first CSA submission. You can email us through if you have questions when you receive your initial feedback, especially if you have for resubmission. So we can support you and provide you prior to your resubmission deadlines further support such as review of the policies we ask you to revise and if you have further clarification in relation to our initial feedback. So if we assess your CSA as compliant on initial one or after one resubmission, congratulations. Your application will now move to the next stage. It will be first be approved by 2 governance committees of ACFID, which is MEC and CCC, and then it will be approved by the ACFID board. Once you are approved by the ACFID board, you are now an interim member of ACFID, pending your official joining to the ACFID family in the next AGM, which happens around October or November every year. So we will work with you to meet the deadlines, but there is an expiry date for new applicants. This may mean that you will have to repay and redo the application if you will not be approved by the board within 18 months after the deadline. So, right. I guess I'll be moving now to the next slide. I'm gonna turn over this to Whitney or Karina.
Great, thanks, Karina. Maybe you can take the first question, first 2 questions, or maybe the first 3.
Yeah,
and then I can
sure.
answer the next couple at once.
So as I think I might have touched on it a little bit earlier, but once you've submitted that initial eligibility form way back at the start of the process before all of that really deep CSA work, basically it comes to us for review, and as I think I mentioned, we try to do that within a week or 2 at most. Might depend a little bit on the team's capacity, but basically we will assess that, and then if everything looks okay and the organisation looks suitable for membership, we will approve that, and then you would receive a formal notification from us with the details of how to make that initial application fee payment. And then once that payment has been confirmed as received, we then, from our end, we would open up your full application form and code self-assessment. So you wouldn't have access to those until that eligibility part has all been processed. But then those will open up for you in the My ACFID portal, so you'll be able to start going in and seeing what information is required and what things need to be filled out. So that CSA form, as I think definitely been kind of touched on a couple of times during this webinar, will be submitted by one of two application deadlines per year, either that end of January or July deadline, and then you'll move into that process of working with the code team on any remedial work and further assessments that need to be done. So who needs to approve our full member application form? I believe that is because that actually does sit more with the code and standards team, that part of the form, and I believe it's the organizational CEO that needs to approve that. Yep. And therefore, if they reject it, I think then it would go back to you as an organization to need to kind of to do extra work on it until it's a sufficient state for them to approve. But feel free to correct me, Whitney, if that's different, because I don't actually approve those the full application forms.
I thought this was the eligibility form, but the way that it's phrased does not seem like the part of the process that it falls under us. But yes, yes, your board chair and your CEO are required to also have a login for My ACFID. Once you and your, team fill out the CSA, you will need to manually get your CEO and your board chair to approve the CSA. They do need to have their own individual logins, and this needs to be done through our system so that they have the right permissions and tagged as CEO and or board chair to be able to access those approval buttons. So it can't just be like you have a login, you've written up the CSA, and then submitted it, and then you give your login to your CEO and your board. They won't be able to see or find the approval buttons because our system tries to keep all of these roles quite separate. And this is why, again, I think earlier I did say that we do have two systems. It is important for you to have one login per person per system, because the way that our system works is it tracks your specific email and your specific profile, and whatever systems and permissions we set in the back end is what you get to access in My ACFID and in Learn with ACFID as well. So if you don't have the right permissions or you're using somebody else's profile, you might not actually be able to access the right things that you need to. So just make your own login. Yes, and yeah, you shouldn't be. Hopefully, your board chair and your CEO are word up enough and educated, like, you've talked them through the process about it, that they don't reject the full member application, because if you do, then there's a whole bunch of other processes that we have to trigger. So try and get your CEO and your board chair on board. We would like to apply for the ANCP program with DFAT. Can you fast track our application so that we can apply for this year? Short answer is no. We cannot do that. We do not in any way control or influence the ANCP program guidelines or eligibility. All we are is a stepping stone to ANCP if you would like to apply for that. And the new rule, as has come in since I think early this year, is that you do need to show that you are with ACFID or have been an ACFID member for 2 full years before you can even start the application for ANCP. And again, we do not have enough influence or connections with DFAT themselves to be able to say, oh, please fast track these members. So please keep that in mind if you are planning on applying for ANCP. And educating your board about how long this process actually takes, because I think one of the biggest surprises that most applicants have is that this takes a really long time, and the CSA is a lot of work, and we do ask for lots of things to verify how your organization works and does things. Can we get assistant with the code self-assessment before we submit our application? Depends on the assistance. We do provide heaps and heaps of resources and resources, templates, all those things online. And so we're likely to direct you to most of those resources to have a look at first. But if you have a very specific question, we will help you out. And like Marvin says, if you're already in the process and doing a resubmission, we're happy to preview some of the amended policies so that we can check that it meets all of the requirements, so you don't have to go through another third resubmission, because again, that holds up your application. Can you review our policies before we submit a CSA? Sometimes. I can't give you a definite yes or a no. Definitely depends on our workload as well as how many members we're assessing. As you can see, you know, the team of our team is 3 people. So, you know, we already have to do annual assessments for, you know, 130 members plus all of the new applicants. So you can see sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. The best way to check all of your requirements is to match up all the verifiers in the QOF. That's exactly what we assess on. How do we keep track of our application, and how do we resubmit our CSA? Great questions. I'm going to show you in the next slide. So once you have access to your MyACFID, when you go into your code of conduct reporting part section, you'll get this dashboard. Yours won't look like this because, you know, this is a test portal, but it has like multiple CSAs. You'll probably just have one, but the status will always be there to show you what is happening and where it is, and your due dates and what financial year you're reporting on. So the most important to keep track of is your status. So you'll always see it on the bottom. That's the I guess those are the different options that you'll get to see. Not yet started, in progress, complete and waiting for CEO and chair approval, complete or waiting for CEO approval, or complete waiting for chair approval. So it doesn't matter whether your CEO approves first or your chair approves first, but you need to get both to do that. And there is no automated message for that to happen. So if you go onto your dashboard and your status is sitting at complete, waiting for CEO and chair approval, it means that your chair and your CEO haven't yet approved. So you can email us and say, oh, we've finished and we've submitted. Is it in your queue yet? Are you going to assess it yet? But it means that, but if you still see that in your status and we check in our backend that the status is still waiting for CEO and chair approval, it means it actually hasn't come to us in our queue yet. It's still waiting in your queue, and you need to go and trigger that process with your leadership. So just, yeah, all of the information can be accessed on your dashboard. And then you can see when it's in our queue and submitted awaiting active feedback, or you can see when we've then come back, you know, with your initial feedback, and it will say active feedback complete, resubmission required, or active review complete. But you will get automated emails if and when your submission is sent back to you for resubmission, or for or it's complete and you move on to the next step. Next slide, please. So to address the question for how to resubmit in your assessment, and again, apologies for some of these, for some of you, if you have not started your CSA, you won't really recognize what these images look like, but these are screenshots of the actual MyACFID portal once you've signed in and logged in and gotten a profile started. This is what it looks like. But for those who have started their CSA or have, you know, logged into MyACFID before, you'll probably recognize these. And this is just showing you how to use the portal as effectively as possible. So again, you will receive an official email to your compliance contact that, you know, if you require a resubmission, it will then say, and the status will show ACFID feedback complete, resubmission required. If you click into the CSA, it will tell you exactly which quality principles and compliance indicators require resubmission, because they will have, instead of complete or incomplete, it'll have resubmission required. And then next slide, please. As for how to then respond and edit your responses, please don't resubmit or edit the main text box. That won't save at all. So please keep that in mind. If you change that main text box, you can't save the changes. So what you'll flick back to us is exactly the same as your original response, and we'll be like, hey, you didn't respond to any of our feedback. What's going on? All right, so the best way to respond to a resubmission is this add comment button up the top. And you'll be able to see that we've got feedback, and then you can add a comment and you just respond to it. It will then start to look a little bit like a text messages, like, you know, I'll text you one thing with one speech bubble, and then you write something back, and that's another speech bubble that I look at, and, you know, same old, same old. So basically think of it as a kind of a continuing conversation for resubmissions. Just please don't edit the main text box. Again, that will not save. But that's how to use the portal and how to quickly work around, you know, using the status and how to resubmit. So hopefully those answers some of the most frequently asked questions. Are there any other questions, or does Martin or Karina, do you want to jump in and add anything?
I'll just briefly reiterate a point I made just earlier, just about the difference in interim membership, full membership, and then full membership being ratified. Because I think it's just important to be clear that that interim full membership is granted when you first go through those approval processes and your application is approved by the ACFID board, and then the 2-year waiting period before you could apply for DFAT funding starts. And then at the next point, when we have an ACFID AGM, because it might depend on what time of year your interim membership was approved, then the organisation would be ratified as full members. But yeah, the 2-year waiting period definitely would start when you first become interim members, and you would also receive access to full membership benefits as interim members. Just thought I'd make that point. Thanks, Whitney.
Thanks, Karina. And thanks everyone for your questions. Yes, there is no limit on how many people you are allowed in the portal, or at least I don't think so. We've never met a limit yet, but I mean, feel free to try if you'd like to. But they all have to have individual emails. They can't have the same emails and the same profile. But do be aware of how many people you want accessing your reporting, I guess, because if you have access to the reporting, you also often have access to financial statements, which I don't know, maybe, you know, in your organization that may not be for all eyes. But if you have a very small organization, that might be okay. So we do have a list somewhere of all the different types of permissions that are available to you. And all the different types of roles that are available in the portal. But yeah, there definitely needs to be some key main contacts, but you can have as many people in the portal as you like. The other question was, can we add attachments to our resubmissions? No. Short answer is no. We prefer not to have attachments, and it's preferable to just send us a link to a specific policy, or just summarize your policies and procedures in the little feedback area. And then I think, yes, yeah, and if you do need help creating new logins, or you want to transfer permissions or roles to anyone, that's totally fine. We can definitely do all of that. You just need to contact Karina or Marvin or I. However, I think on the last slide we've got some emails. That's the best way to contact us. Do you think you could change the slide for me, Marvin? Thanks. There we go. So yes, the best thing is membership questions to be emailed to membership@Accfit. That inbox is always monitored, and same with the code. Any code questions, please email it to the code@accfit.asn.au. That inbox is also always monitored. Yeah, so that I guess finishes the official presentation, but we are scheduled until 1:30, so we've got a few minutes. If you have any other questions or want to talk about anything or ask for any details, happy to just open the floor to all of you for questions. No?
Thanks. We saw some claps. Thank you very much. That
Yes, thank you.
means so much to us. Hopefully, this was really helpful for you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think, yeah, probably just yeah, it's good for us to go through some of these because there are lots of information in lots of different guides and things, but it is a lot of information to take in. And yeah, the CSA process is quite detailed. So yeah, I think sometimes that surprises new applicants just how detailed everything is and how long everything takes. But yes, it is not a
Sure.
fast process.
True. You can also think of the CSA as not just a compliance burden for you, but it's really an opportunity for you to actually level up all your practice, process, and policies, which is actually like what we all aspire on, joining ACFID is to have that, like really effective way of delivering your program. So yeah, don't think of it as a compliance burden. Don't worry.
That's great. Excellent way of putting it, Arvin. Yes, this recording is being recorded, and we'll probably be able to get that out by the end of the week or maybe next week, and we'll send it out, and then we'll pop it on YouTube as well. So this will be here for everyone to rewatch if you'd like. We'll also send out the slides too, so that you can click on some of the links that we've put in there, or just review and refresh yourselves with some of the information that we have put there as well. So thank you again for joining us. If there are no more questions, you are welcome to take 5 minutes back.
There might be one more coming through.
No?
All good.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Brian.
But again, if you do, go away and have other questions, please feel free to email us on the emails that are currently on the screen. Those are the best two best ways to contact our team. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Bye.